Another closely guarded secret of ancient times was an early biological weapon, a toxic honey used by a desperate army to poison its enemies. Bees, wasps and hornets can strike fear in otherwise brave men. Even today, bees kill up to 100 people each year. And in biblical times, military leaders use this fear to terrify enemy armies.
In the Bible, if you take all the references to bees, you will notice that some of them present bees as being a danger, as being even a lethal weapon in war.
And I will send hornets before you, which shall drive out the Hivite, Canaanite and Hittite from before you.
People develop all kinds of ways to use bees. They pack them into little clay pots, which are almost like hand grenades. They attach whole hives to catapults and shoot them into cities.
An ancient account by the Greek historian Strabo contains evidence that this weapon was taken one step further. In 67 BC, something happened in the north of Turkey that's still not fully understood by today's historians. This strange example of biological warfare against the Roman army involved a honey trap of a deadly nature.
There's hugely varied different forms of power struggles going on throughout Roman history. Lots of kings who are very unhappy with their lot and try to rebel.
One of these rebellions was led by King Mithridates. He became one of Rome's most successful enemies.
He really gives the Romans quite some trouble.
The Roman general Pompey the Great was charged with leading a large army against King Mithridates. After a year of battle, the two forces reached the shores of the Black Sea in northern Turkey.
The Romans have the upper hand and Mithridates is retreating. What he does very cleverly, though, is he leaves in his path these pots of honey. The Romans advance, they come across what they think of as delightful little tributes from a fading enemy, eat the honey, but it turns out to be viciously toxic.
Was this honey a ready-made biological weapon?
The soldiers go slightly crazy. It's as if they're high, drunk, then very agitated, and then a lot of them throw up and have diarrhea, and then they get very, very high again and kind of rush around, and this lasts for about 3 days.
Remarkably, the Bible seems to warn of this insidious weapon. Have you found honey? Eat only as much as you need, lest you be filled with it and vomit. But how can honey be toxic? The answer lies in the rhododendron bushes that cover the hillsides of northern Turkey.
There are many examples in nature of toxins, and the rhododendron plant itself is capable of producing natural toxins.
These toxins are called terpenoids. They're found in the nectar collected by bees.
These terpenoids can become incorporated into the honey from the nectar that the bees are gathering from the rhododendron plant.
For a window into how honey intoxication by terpenoids affects the body, Ancient Discoveries has brought in a human guinea pig, former military officer David Shaw. He'll be administered 15 fluid ounces of the terpenoid solution under medical supervision.
I'm pretty anxious, really. It's kind of a step into the unknown with this test. The side effects listed range from just mild dizziness and perspiration to vomiting and coma.
Dave will be overseen by Dr. Adam Cunliffe at the Human Performance Laboratory at the University of Westminster. Dave will be put through a test that will push his cardiovascular system and coordination. He will carry out this test twice, once before and once after taking the terpenoids. Dave runs at 10 miles per hour for 10 minutes. The test will measure his heart rate and oxygen consumption at low levels of activity.
Your heart rate here was 164 on average throughout that test. And we can also see your oxygen consumption, and that turned out to be about 3.8 litres per minute. And it's the oxygen which is required by the exercising muscle. So the harder you're working, the more oxygen you're going to be consuming.
Dave is in peak physical condition, just as the Roman soldiers would have been. His test results are above average, but what effect will the terpenoid solution have on his body? Terpenoids are highly toxic, and Dave is only able to do this under strict medical supervision.
Really, we want to see if his performance is affected. Dave's looking a little bit unsteady on the treadmill. He's finding it difficult to keep in the centre of the track. His heart rate's about 10 beats higher per minute than it was in the previous experiment, and his respiratory exchange is quite a bit higher than it was on the previous test. His performance on the treadmill was significantly affected in a negative way. When we looked at his physiological data, we saw that he was working harder, running at the same speed. Any form of coordinated movement, as a battle would certainly involve, would be seriously affected.
I had no control over my cardiovascular system, and obviously the results show that was greatly diminished.
In essence, we could see it as an early application of a kind of chemical or biological approach to warfare in getting the opposing forces to actually ingest this toxic substance. You could see it almost as a form of culinary Trojan horse.
The results suggest that consuming toxic honey upsets coordination and accelerates fatigue. The 3 squadrons of Pompey's army that found and ate the honey on that fateful day in 67 BC became violently ill. That night, the Romans, still suffering from the effects of the toxin, were annihilated by King Mithridates' army. War drove the development of technology in biblical times.